one of the Public and Active Transport Committee meeting, and welcome to you all, and to my co-chair Andrew Noon, and welcome to the staff, particularly to Lorraine Cheen. Thank you, Lorraine, joining our transport team as transport manager. Praise the Lord. Thank you. And to Doug Rogers, of course, and Julian Phillips, and all the councillors, welcome. I'm going to start with karakia. We've been provided those generously, are safe for us to use, so away we go. Tuia ki ronga, tuia ki raro, tuia te ki waho, tuia ki roto, tuia ki te here tangata. Ka rongo te pō, ka rongo te ao, haumie, huie, tai. Okay, so this committee, as I mentioned, is brand new. It's yet to find its place or even its full membership yet. It needs to include and serve the two communities, Ōtepoti Dunedin and Tahuna Queenstown, that are provided for with our public transport system. It also needs to include their territorial authorities in some way, shape or form, and that is not yet finalised. The purpose of this committee and its terms of reference neither are fully finalised yet, but this committee is designed to fill a gap in our governance by providing oversight of public transport, Dunedin provision of service, routes, data, contracts, complaints. Same for Queenstown. Regional total mobility service, that's included in Wanaka and Oamaru, as well as the two public transport centres. It will also have some role around active transport, which is yet to be defined. Today's meeting focuses on public transport reports. There's nothing to consider for active transport at this point, but we need to work out over time, not today, we don't have an agenda item all for it, but we do need to work out how we support the development of active transport and its vital role in the planning of a complete integrated transport network that's safe and efficient for all ages. We need to understand with our partners, the territorial authorities, particularly Queenstown Lakes and Dunedin, and Waka Kotahi, how we achieve the goals already articulated in our long-term plan, public transport plan, and the government's general policy statement on transport. Of course, we have a new one of those shortly. And also we have to consider carefully the developing spatial plans of our communities. There are some key and urgent elements in this that this committee needs to work on. And most pressing is the issue of how we include our partners in a way that serves the transport needs of our communities' current and future needs. Once that's sorted, and while we do everything else as well, we need to look at climate change, the contribution of the transport network to GHG emissions, and the need for us to reduce those emissions while also supporting our community aspirations. We urgently need to work on the Queenstown public and active transport, because the development of that town's eastern corridor is predicated in its own planning documents on a 40% mode shift. That is massive, and it's a predication, and we have a responsibility to make sure that we are up to speed with this. They desperately need a strong and collaborative plan to achieve anything like this. Dunedin has its own issues, but they are different, and we'll need a different approach. Dunedin also has groups driving active travel links who need our support and engagement. This needs the attention of this committee as well. We also need to consider the aspirations of Wanaka, which has built and is trialling their own solution with the Link bus. They too want greatly improved active travel links and public travel links, and we need to respond. All of this is a challenge for us, but we're committed, as this committee, and Andrew and I are committed to this, to developing a governance structure that is inclusive, responsive and flexible. And Gretchen and I think our whole table is committed to this, as well as our CE and acting CE. My hope for this committee is it can bring effective governance oversight of all partners and their aspirations to take a strategic view of an evolving transport network that's fit for current needs and responsive to issues such as climate change and community development and plans towards the future. So big ask of this community, and thank you all for being here today. So that said, we'll carry on with the agenda. Sorry for the speech, but I felt those things needed saying, and I did want to welcome our team who's going to be responsible for a lot of this work. Apologies. Brian Scott submitted apologies for this meeting. Do we have any others? We've heard from Michael. Thank you. And apology from Michael as well. Public forum? No.
Apologies be accepted.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Moving too fast now. Worried about time. Public forum. There's been no requests. So has everyone moved that the apologies okay?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. No requests for public forum. Move on there. Confirmation to the agenda. Confirmation of the agenda. Move a seconder. I'll move it. Kate will second. All in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. Declaration of interests. Members are reminded of the need to stand aside from decision making when a conflict arises between their role as an elected representative and any private or external interests they might have. And we note that councillor interests are published on the ORC website. Don't think anybody have any. Okay, so we'll welcome the team up to the table if we can and begin on our matters for consideration. So this first item, 4.1, is public transport patronage report. 6.1. Yeah, it says 6.1 here. I see it. I've got an old one up there. Okay, 6.1. Thank you. So this one's to update the committee on the success of Route 1 changes, and that's the Dunedin Palmerston service implemented in May. And interesting to watch how this one's been playing out, actually. Really popular, really successful, and in my view, it brings some equity into the transport network as well. Over to you, Doug. Thank you. Welcome.
Kia ora koutou. Start with the patronage report. Just the highlights really. Julian Phillips is available here to talk to his report. Dunedin patronage is up 14% since last year, which again is showing a fairly strong recovery, and our revenue is up 16%. So these are very positive indicators. Queenstown, this is in context. Queenstown is up 45% from last year in terms of patronage. Of course, we're running very limited services there, and the tourism return is the explanation for most of that. It's still lower than pre-COVID, so we're about 18% down from pre-COVID, and you will be aware of the significant driver shortages we have at the moment running our reduced program, which will be returning to the full program around June. And the operator themselves are actually flying in drivers from other cities to operate the service now, which I think is a fantastic outcome for the service up there. And Julian Phillips is available to talk to his data.
And Julian, I should have noted that Julian was, as the author of this report, supported by Gemma Wilson and Palmerston Johnston. Thank you, team. Okay, so has anyone got any questions? First, we'll start with the overall public transport patronage report. Gretchen?
Yeah, sorry, I just realised that I'm supposed to be asking a question when I was just enthused by the report, really, and wanting to comment on where we're getting to with the lift in patronage is fantastic. And yeah, I was surprised by the Queenstown patronage decreased by 18% since pre-COVID. So I guess the question would be that's fairly positive. Would you suggest as to indications of a quick recovery after perhaps we do get a more we perhaps return to the full schedule? There's been some talk of it'll be a slow recovery, but it seems as though perhaps it's going to be a quick one.
I think for Queenstown, I think you're right. I think with a full service operating, we would possibly be at around the pre-COVID levels, around 100% of where we were at 2018-19. Queenstown's been the worst hit in terms of cancellations and driver availability for a whole variety of reasons. Some stats in the report about the number of missed trips and all that sort of thing. And obviously, the last month actually, which has stabilised considerably, because as Doug said, they've managed to, the operators managed to secure drivers from other areas whilst we wait for permanent drivers to come on board. But up until really this month, the situation there has been pretty bad in terms of, less than desirable in terms of service levels. So operators doing everything they can, but the service hasn't been there. The capacity hasn't been there to service the demand.
Yeah.
So once the capacity is there, then and we return to full timetables, which should provide an extra 30% capacity, then I think we'll give some confidence back to locals who are not as impressed as they could be with their service at the moment, and also to tourists, because the service that are operating at the moment, when we've been down there, every single bus is absolutely rammed, and that is part of the situation, is getting that extra capacity, getting the drivers in to provide that capacity to satisfy the demand, and then also making the quality of the service, the reliability and all that stuff, getting that back on track.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think it's worth mentioning on Dunedin as well. The patronage is great. It's good that it's going up, and it's really good that it's at a level that's higher than pre-COVID, which puts us in a good position in terms of comparisons to other places in the country. But at the same time, I guess and it's great news. It doesn't mean people are thrilled with the service, because there are still reliability issues. So we still need to work on the quality of the service, and that again, that'll come with additional drivers. And by and large, the move back to full timetables this month has been really positive, and we're dropping far fewer trips. But in the current environment, I think there's with the $2 fare, or effectively $1 fare we've got at the moment, there are people who are attracted to the service, and there are people who need to use the service because of the cost involved. So we need to make that service better. So it's a great result, but I think we will improve further as months go on.
Huge opportunity.
Andrew, and then Kevin.
Yeah, thanks for the report. A lot of positives in there. I'm just interested with the companies being able to shift drivers around from other parts of the country, where there has been pretty much a clear message around the drivers shortage right across the country and further afield. So some budget want. Do you know how the contractors have been able to achieve that? So
in the case of Queenstown, the number of drivers required is much lower than Dunedin, being only five routes. So the requirements there are for 5, 6, 7 drivers on a short-term basis, whilst permanent drivers that we have data on are being recruited. They have to go, some of them from overseas, they have to go through the visa process, training, learning the local area and all that sort of thing. So these are sort of short-term rotating positions. So it's not being done in a way that would affect other networks around the country where they have their own problems and operations. So it's basically a few drivers from here and there around a month, and then swapping out with other people. But hopefully within a month or two, we'll have permanent drivers in place who will be there for the duration, and that will help us return to the full timetables in June as well.
Thank you.
Kevin, and then Alan.
Oh yeah, good to see that numbers are, and it is a very trying time for you without doubt. But so part of the increase I would see is coming from the fact that we've taken over these school bus routes, and I think there was just on 87,000 tickets that we're selling to those. How's that actually integrating now, and do you think you've got a pretty good balance going?
Well, funny enough, I was talking to that with Doug and arranged before the meeting. Our public transport plan, regional public transport plan in 2015, and our subsequent one last year, in both those reports, we signified we were moving away from the provision of school services. So the concept is that the existing services we run will be near schools or go past schools, and a lot of them do. And effectively that will fulfill the role of delivering school kids. But particularly in Dunedin, due to some local operators who were last year at the end of 2021 pulled out of the market, there is a school children are finding it quite challenging to get to school, and we have actually gone the other opposite direction and put services in which are available to the general public, but 95% of the passengers are school kids, and we're putting new services in. We have services that have actually got agreed by council last year, but haven't been put in yet because of the driver shortage. So we're sort of moving the other direction and providing those services. But it's again, capacity is actually an issue. For example, the Kings service we put in, Kings and Queens service that runs from Green Island to Kings and Queens twice a day. That was put in really early last year. Very successful, always very busy, which was great. They were taking about an average around 60 passengers per trip. And this term, that's increased to 120, 130. So the bus companies are doing whatever they can. They're doubling back to pick up kids, getting there early to pick up any early kids there, putting 2 buses on at a time. Likewise, there are other areas where school children are increasingly using the service. And so I think we need to, long-term look at what our position is on school services. There is, again, probably more demand out there than we have capacity for right now. But they're doing very well. But another example, Palmerston was mentioned earlier, so we've got a report, I think, on the performance of the new Palmerston service, which is weekends. That's doing fantastic, really, really good, well valued, and probably the cheapest way to get up to Palmerston, which is 60Ks or something for $1. But during the week, at peak times, so school times effectively, the service is now at capacity. So we've got a larger bus on, it's got extra standing capacity, but it's 100 km/h route and very long. So it's, standing capacity isn't ideal. So we're working with the operator to see what extra capacity can be put on, what cost that would be, etc. Again, it's just the services are very popular, but at peak times, they are a number of areas that are getting to capacity in terms of what we currently offer.
Thanks, Janet.
Just before I come to you, Alan, can we just expand on that a little bit for Queenstown? How's the back to school been for Queenstown? Certainly, I've noticed personally that the traffic is unbelievably high now at that time. But how's our service coping?
Yeah, the traffic's pretty horrific, and that affects everything, unfortunately. But in terms of schools, what we've done there is we've made, at the request of the schools, some variations to existing routes to divert past the two I can think of are Arrowtown Primary School and Wakatipu High School. Now, the Arrowtown one, effectively the Arrowtown School is the second stop on the route from where it starts in Arrowtown. Therefore, it has capacity when it gets there, and at that time of day, there aren't many members of the general public on the bus anyway, so that's working quite well. Drops people off to the Queenstown Event Centre and carries on its way. And likewise, the Wakatipu High Service departs, the way it's arranged is it departs from the Frankton interchange and takes a diversion by the school, so that the school effectively becomes the first stop in the route, and therefore we have some capacity there. But again, those services are getting close to capacity. There are other demands from other areas that are further out, Jack's Point, Halley's Farm, those sort of areas, where it's not so much a capacity issue, it's more the frequency. So at the moment, the frequency of those services is quite low, around sort of hourly or something. I suspect demand increase in the future. But at the moment, capacity isn't so much the issue, it's more the traffic and roading works and everything else, which is as bad as it's ever been there, but hopefully will improve.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, look, thank you. You've actually answered my question. I was going to ask about the school bus services too. So it's really good to hear that you've been so responsive where there is that need and looking way for cater for other areas too. Because I know there's that evidence that parents will not use other public transport or active transport if they have to hop in their car to take the kids to school. So if they go on the bus, it's really good quite a bit. Yeah. So my question is elaborated. Thank you.
An interesting capacity issue we have in Queenstown, actually, which relates to school kids, is bike racks. So an increasing, I suppose it sort of dovetails a little bit into active travel, but an increasing number of kids are getting to school in a combination of bike and bus. So they're using the bike rack to get to, say, Lake Hayes, and then hopping on the bus. But our bike racks can only take two bikes. So that's actually, bike capacity has actually been an issue. So we're looking with the operator at solutions around that to fit more on.
Thanks.
I was just going to say, look, in my view as public transport's not there to provide school buses. So I find this extremely frustrating that we've been forced to provide services for school kids, which wasn't our core business. And it's happened because the Ministry of Education has found a clause somewhere that says if there's public transport available, they don't have to provide a school bus service. They've reduced school bus services across New Zealand by stealth. And I think it's an appalling story, and they should have consulted with the public and the taxpayer before they started this. I'm pleased to say that I've got a commitment from MOE, from James Meffin, that he's not going to reduce school bus services in Queenstown for the next 3 years. That was the commitment, wasn't it, Doug? And he's putting that on hold. But my view is parents much prefer their kids on school buses rather than public transport. They don't always get to school on public transport because there's a lot of other stops. And that's one of the reasons I suspect why we don't always have such good school attendance. The MOE should not be reducing school bus services without New Zealanders understanding the consequences of it, and nor should we be expected to make up the gap through public transport provision. I find it extremely annoying.
Thanks. Kate.
I would offer a different opinion on that, but I'm not sure that I'm allowed to have the chance. I mean, I actually think it's absolutely brilliant that young people who can't drive learn the public transport system network early. But I also understand that should come with some funding, or at least some understanding and pre-warning of that happening from the Ministry of Education, who probably benefit from funding schools and education. That wasn't my question.
Thanks, Kate. We will have a question coming.
Well, no, I've almost forgotten that. I'm intrigued on the transit app, and I thank Elliot for informing me better how that app works. We're making a few assumptions in this report, and we always have to assume things, and COVID and tourism and Queenstown. Into Dunedin, it's got a lot harder to drive because of roadworks, and so we've seen and that may be why we've seen an increase. I think that it's important to ensure that people have a really good experience and want to then stay on the buses when the roadworks. But can we use the transit app to gauge some of that stuff as a survey? We survey, when we do the survey, it's about the cleanliness of the bus and various other things.
Yeah.
How can we do short soundbite experiential surveys about why have you just recently started taking the bus, what will keep you going, or things like that? Because otherwise we're assuming a lot of things, and I'm not, we can only assume sometimes.
Yeah, so we've got I think the survey you're talking about is the mandated NZTA survey.
Yeah, I'm not blaming you for the building.
No, not at all. And look, we have that survey coming up, and we'll do it. Within that survey, I think it's 50 questions, and 40 of them are mandated, so we can actually add some of our own questions at the end. But in terms of what you're asking for, we've actually started looking at this. I think possibly another previous council meeting, we committed that sometime this year we'll do our own surveys outside of the mandated ones we have to do. And two options we looked at the moment, which work in terms of being short and sharp, are the transit app itself, which has quite if you look at the population of Dunedin, say, and the number of people who are using it, a high proportion of those are transit app users. That can actually be used to trigger as an instant quick survey, 5 bullet points or some buttons you press that can do the survey pretty quickly. So as soon as people log on, they can have the option, or can be a pop-up, those sort of things. So that's one option, and that sort of automatically outputs to an Excel spreadsheet with your own analysis and all that. Also the Wi-Fi on the buses, which is free, that still has quite high usage. You can have it so that when people connect, it automatically pops up a quick, hey, answer this question type thing. And we discussed with the team about just to encourage them to take up, incentivizing that with a draw for some BCard credit, that sort of thing. So we are looking at my view is we haven't made a decision on which way to do it. I think the transit has the highest number of users in terms of people getting on the bus and instantly looking at something, or being off the bus and waiting for a bus. So that's something we are looking at here.
And one reason for my question was totally agree with your comments about GHG gases, greenhouse gases, that we need to reduce that in transport. But the problem with PP and why we've got active transport in here as well is often a substitution rather than a conversion out of cars. And so it'd be really good to understand that part of it as well.
Yeah,
I think, and that sort of survey work.
Tim. Next
Yeah,
is-
my question is just around the BCard. I see there's 188,000 issued, which is pretty good. I was in Wellington last week. I have got a BCard. I've been using it. It would have been nice to have been able to use it in Wellington. They use a snapper
They
card.
use Snapper.
And I'm just interested in knowing how many different card providers there are. And I looked at the BCard and I think it just covers off quite a few of the smaller regions.
Yeah.
And not sort of Auckland, Wellington. I don't know what happens. I've got no idea. But I'm interested in the standardisation of card like that can be used. So what sort of work was done in choosing the BCard? How many providers of these cards are there in New Zealand? And is there any kind of approach to bring them together or?
Yeah.
In terms of
So basically,
solution.
yeah, it's a national solution and other regions are coming on board with a replacement system which will be, I think, a kind of pay wave type thing. So you can get whatever the new P card is going to be called, or you can use your debit card. So in addition to all the current regions, the likes of, I think the first one who's going live with the new replacement system is Christchurch, who currently aren't on the BCard scheme. So over time, I think I can't remember what the duration is, 4-year period or something like that. I think our implementation is like 2 to 3 years from now. More regions, effectively most of the country, will be on the national ticketing system.
So just change the name of the card, will you, basically?
It will be a completely new system. So as well as the, I don't actually know if the card name is being changed or if it's a national name or we have got a local one, but the technology behind it will change and it'll be a lot more convenient. A lot of people want a percentage of people who want a BCard type thing, a separate thing. A lot of people just want to be able to swipe on with their
So, Julian, I wonder if maybe Nick could just give us the new council a little bit of history around this, because we've been heavily involved in the BCard, but obviously also heavily involved in the setup of a national solution.
Yeah, it probably warrants a separate briefing because you actually go back, national ticketing has been on the agenda for 15 years probably. So our BCard system, or we refer to it as RITS, because it's the Regional Consortium Ticketing System, is sort of a precursor to that. So it was always, it's intended as an interim system so it moved 9 regional councils originally onto the one system. And we've since had Gisborne join as well. So there's 10 regional councils on the RITS BCard system. And then the next thing that's in process of happening now is a move to a national system. And that'll be, if you like, the next generation of ticketing systems. So the system we've got is a card-based system. So all the information is stored on the card. It's still tag on, tag off. It's a really good functional system. But the national ticketing system will move into what's called an open loop system. So what the information will be held in all the brains of the system runs in the back office. The card is just a token, and then you can use any card. Still be tag on, tag off, but it will basically do the pricing rather than with your card and the money being stored on your card, if you like. It'll be actually just take the money off your account in the back end. So it gives a lot more pricing flexibility. So the currently, the 10 councils and RITS are all on one system. Canterbury is actually on they're within it as well, but and the RITS system is within it, but their system is actually a way earlier version. So theirs isn't tag on, tag off. So there's them. Then Wellington is on Snapper, and Auckland is on the hot card. Yeah. So over the next few years, the plan is for all of us, the 10 councils and RITS and the 3 other big regions to move to the one national ticketing system. So the procurement's been done for that. A preferred supplier has been signed up. So we're moving to it'll move to Cubic, will be the ticketing provider. So and Cubic actually provides these ticketing systems around the world. They do like they do New York, for example. I'm trying to think, are they London as well? They've got big ticketing systems. So we'll have the one system throughout the country. There's still a lot to be worked through around whether you'll have whether you will still be able to issue cards. But the benefit of this new system is that you'll be able to register any card with a chip as your token. So in theory, you can just use an existing card that you've got. You don't have to use the branded card, although you'll still have them because, for example, school children don't have credit cards. The new system as well also will move to what's called EMV, which is where you'll be able to use the system almost on a unregistered account basis, where it'll recognise if you use the same card over and over through the same day, it'll give you all the standard daily pricing and everything. So yeah, the aim is over the next few years that we will move to that national system, and you could in theory catch the bus here in Dunedin during the day, end up in Wellington, and still just be using the same system and the same card to do it.
Sorry, if I can answer. Just to add also that the 10 councils on RITS, we're actually the host council. So this is why Nick knows a lot about this. And secondly, the new system, the national system, is being fully funded by Waka Kotahi. So normally the councils would fund some portion of this. So the new system will be one of the last councils to join. So MITES will be a few years away because we have a pretty good solution already. We won't have to contribute to the investment of these are expensive systems. Very helpful that Waka Kotahi is funding it.
Thank you, and thanks, Nick, for that explanation. Elliot, did you have a question?
Yeah, two brief ones. Just first one was just wondering how we measure the number of missed trips or how that's included, just because I know that the transit app and the website sometimes don't list all of the trips that are actually missed.
Yeah, so
that's not.
we have a system that it relies on the operators themselves entering some data manually, but other than that, it sort of auto-populates. But then with our tracking system, if we find, we can look at historic data. So if we find that we suspect there are some trips that didn't run but haven't been declared, then we log those as well. Technically, by contract, a missed trip is also a trip that runs 15 minutes or late or more when it departs the terminus. There's some leeway around that because roadworks and things are pretty horrific in Dunedin and Queensland at the moment, so it's very difficult to keep to time, but we monitor that as well and just general timeliness. So yeah, it's we are looking at some of it's a little bit reactive, to be honest, and we're looking at back-end systems that will be more proactive, so we actually know in advance all the time when something is running late rather than having to physically look at a screen and monitor it that way.
Sorry, if I could just add to that too, and Doug, you might want to add to this as well, but we had a lot of missed trips in Queenstown, particularly even on a reduced timetable, didn't we? What were we averaging on a daily basis?
Well, I know the worst day was 50%.
50%, yeah.
So we were averaging around 25 to 30
missed trips per day.
Consistently per day.
So look, and just to reassure council that one of the ways that we penalise operators for missed trips as part of our contracts is that we don't pay for them. So that's the penalty clause. So we don't pay for missed trips, but we don't want them. It's been a nightmare actually. And so again, look, we acknowledge this has been dreadful, and particularly in Queenstown. As we've come onto the full timetable in Dunedin, as Julian said earlier, we've had some missed trips as we started the month. But look, we monitor these very closely and we do check on them because ultimately it impacts on how much we pay the operators for their services.
How confident would you say that you are in those numbers, though, given that there are, some minor issues with the tracking, and then with how confident are we with what the operators are reporting to us?
Very confident, because in terms of customers aren't, there are penalties for not declaring missed trips anyway, and secondly, customers are not shy at telling us when their services don't turn up. So rightfully so. So we follow up pretty much everything. We've also got we've even employed almost for 10 months now. We've got two temporary staff working permanently on logging and monitoring missed trips as well. Just because it's it's not a business as usual situation at the moment with driver shortages, and COVID is still an issue as well, but particularly in Dunedin for drivers. So, yeah.
Thank you. I'll get another one, Alex.
Too sorry. I'm just wanting to ask how the bus drivers are doing. Have we had any feedback with, you know, there's roadworks, there's some drivers, reports of drivers facing abuse and stuff?
Yeah.
Has there been any feedback on any of those kind of issues, cruise ships, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so we there's two issues. I'll come to cruise ships in a minute. The it's not a Dunedin only or Otago issue, it's a national issue. So on occasion, small proportion of passengers will take their frustrations out on services not turning up, traffic in general, on the bus drivers. Vast majority of our passengers are great, drivers are great, but they do take the brunt of some antisocial behaviour, and then just generally stuff that's nothing to do with public transport, just people who are a bit aggressive on the bus. So we have a close relationship with our local operators, our local branch managers. We, working with the comms team, have started, we've got some social media apps, some messaging, some signage on the buses, just, you know, clarifying what the situation is for the drivers, that they're doing their best, that we really appreciate them. And we speak to drivers individually and unions and so on fairly regularly as well. So yeah, really aware of that issue, and we're, you know, we have security, we're trying at the bus hub as well, just for some, again, very small proportion of people with antisocial behaviour, that sort of thing. So that's something we're managing collaboratively.
Yeah, Julian, if I could also, if I could also add, last year when this council was the first council in New Zealand to go to $27.76 for bus drivers.
Yeah.
Most of the public in both our communities didn't realise that bus drivers were so poorly paid. And we had a huge groundswell of people who started saying thank you to their bus drivers. It was reported in the newspaper.
Yeah.
And look, more than ever, we need to continue that.
Yeah.
You know, if we don't value our bus drivers, it's not just about pay, it's also about the way passengers respect them and treat them. Then we're going to struggle, as we have done, in terms of local recruitment. And so just, you know, we just keep working hard to remember that we're lucky to have our drivers, and they don't have an easy job. They don't get overly well paid, and we obviously value them and we rely on them.
We did observe, Julian and I took a trip down to Port Chalmers to look at the cruise ship problem directly.
On a bus?
No, sorry, we took a regional council car. But we you know, there was large queues and that sort of thing, and we did observe some rather unsavoury behaviour from a couple of people. But these weren't locals; these were cruise ship people, demanding more buses, demanding this and that. So it does happen. The poor bus driver himself was out of change, and you know, there was all these little added things that make for that frustration. So it does exist. We've seen it, but we are putting things in here.
And this goes back to Pim's earlier point about the buses being designed for local transport, but are, of course, expected to also welcome tourist transport. So, yeah, there's things for us to work through with that. Kate, you had a last question?
No, the last question. Look, and great to have you here, Lorraine. And I have to say that I love your leadership of walking in here with your BCard showing, which means that sometimes, and I was reflecting with this earlier today with the CEO, sometimes we are very critical of what we know, but we don't know necessarily what the outsiders see. Can I ask you, since I think it's nice if you get a question, what you have reflected on the bus service that you've seen from your experience elsewhere? Because I think it's really refreshing to get because we can be critical as we like to be on that. Is that possibly an unfair question, but I'd love to hear what you have to say about it.
Thank you. Pleased to put some of my early thoughts for you. Firstly, there's an old saying that, you know, if everyone puts their problems in the middle of the room and you get to choose which one you take home, you probably go home with your own, because different problems here to what we have I've come from Bay of Plenty Regional Council. If we had capacity issues on our network, on our buses, we would be so happy. We did have high patronage with the same issues with the schools and the reduced Ministry of Education services and the children, but we had free fares for students, so that was really affecting our bottom line there and our fare box recovery. But again, I guess on balance, the councillors there all agreed with the the children using the buses and giving them a nice lesson. But my experience since I arrived here has been fantastic. I arrived the end of the first week of full services, so I guess returned to full services with full timetable, which I don't think we could quite put a date on when we were going to get there in Bay of Plenty, so I think you've done really well. And as Pim noted, you moved early on the driver wages issue, which is really important because the issues that with antisocial behaviour and with the drivers that I've heard about since I've been here, yes, they're happening in Dunedin, but they're happening all around the country. And we had exactly the same, if not worse, instances, unfortunately. Bay of Plenty, and we saw media stabbing on a bus in Auckland in the last week or two as well. So yes, it happens here, but it is happening everywhere, and it's just something that we're working on. We've got even already put together some ideas to further support and show appreciation for bus drivers, but again, I've noticed the signs up in the buses, and the behaviours that I've noticed, and I catch the bus, at least twice every day for my commute, but even on the weekend and more often. I've travelled quite a bit of the city on the buses so far. The behaviour's been great. I've been on bus services where the driver has said hello to every passenger as they've onboarded, and the passengers have said hello, goodbye as they've come on and off. So that's been really great, and I'm really excited to be here. Going to Queenstown next week to catch a few buses over there and maybe have a few meetings too. And I'll definitely stick with the problems that ORC's got. I'm quite happy to be working here.
That's great.
And thank you, Kate, for bringing that up. I should have given you the opportunity to introduce yourself, Lorraine, and I apologise for that. Is there anything else in your experience that might be useful for us to know at this point?
I'll be annoying my colleagues with all my little observations all the way through, but yeah.
I look forward to catching up with you at the bus hub, or we'll start at ORC office probably next week in Queenstown. If anybody else is around, you're very welcome to join us. We might catch a bus or something then to see how we're going. Okay, I think that brings us to the end of, what's that?
If it turns up.
Yes, well, we'll see about that. Yeah, so thank you for that. Anybody else got any questions?
Let me note the report.
Let me note the report, that's all we're being asked to do.
I've got a subsequent motion, or I'm happy to add it to it. And it's not a criticism. I think that we as governors haven't had KPIs directing reports and directing where we want to go with public transport. And I've circulated a second part of that motion, which I'd like to put. I'm happy to second the notice.
Happy for it to be incorporated into the.
Has everybody seen that
I have
motion?
sent you-
One of Gary's seen that online.
Would you like me to pop it up?
I think maybe pop it up is probably wise. This the best place to put it, I suppose it is, yeah.
And well, it is that the CEO and chairs of PAT meet and develop strategic KPI for resident transport reporting to be presented to council for adoption with their annual plan. And that then means that we'll at least have a year's worth of data or some data as we develop the long-term plan. There are two parts of this. One is that if we don't measure passenger transport, some of the KPIs and how it's is it substituting for bikes or is it substituting for cars, and we're actually not really understanding the system, which I think is important. And I think we need to lift our general questioning up from necessarily in the past and about routes and everything, but understanding what we're trying to drive at. And I think that can be, I think the chair is all over this, but it's just how do we articulate that in a way that we get reports that are really focusing on that shift that we want to see.
Okay, what do I have to do, Liz? Anything? Yeah, Andrew's happy with that.
Yep, got that.
So do we need to put them separately or
No.
together is all fine?
Maybe if I could just add, sorry, to support this motion completely. Look, this is totally logical and consistent with the fact that we've made this a full committee of council. This is a shift towards improving the visibility of the work that we're doing in public and active transport and recognising the importance of it. And logically, we can't manage it, and you can't govern it either if you can't measure it. So I'm totally in support of this motion. We'll work with council, with the chairs, as you've indicated, Kate, to ensure that we have effective KPIs that help us make this a priority for this council.
Thanks, Pim. So, Andrew?
Can I just speak to the motion?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I want to speak to what Kate suggested. I fully support the additional motion, but just to the staff, thank you very much for this patronage report. It's a pretty positive report, but there's still plenty of challenges out there for you. So I suppose from governance, and I'm sure Madam Chair will probably reinforce this, but we really appreciate you're at the coalface. You're dealing with some pretty demanding situations, and as you've alluded to, with the responsive approach that you had with dealing with the demands of school children over the or school pupils over the recent months. It's been a lot of positive activity that's been happening. And yesterday I caught the bus from the hub up to Kemia Road, and just talking about acknowledging bus drivers. There was about 20 people on the bus. I happened to be about second or third last one to get off. Every passenger acknowledged the bus driver and thanked them, thanked him, the male bus driver, for the trip. So there's a lot of positives out there, and as Lorraine's alluded to, the problems that we've got, sure, at the moment for our communities, but if you look across the country, it's not all bad. So thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. So you've put the motion that you seconded?
I'm seconding.
That's a clarifying question. Would that be, so those KPIs be presented to the committee for adoption? Or
The council has to adopt everything, no delegation, but yes, it'll come to the committee, then to council for confirmation. I suspect.
Right, okay.
I was concerned by the timing issues as well. So.
Yes, I'm concerned about them, but we'll come to that at a later date. Okay, so I'll put that.
Thank you, Alex. I just had a similar question to Alex, but I assume these KPIs are basically going to come out of the report we've just seen. How we see it. I'm just a little nervous around having the CEO and chairs of the PAT developing strategic KPIs. I think that's probably a job for a full council, which it's just a technicality I know. And one of the KPIs covering like this, a strategic KPI, as opposed to an active KPI or a doing KPI. I'm just.
Yeah, so if I can respond to that, maybe look, from an operational perspective, there's any number of measures, and actually this is a very operational report, but it's a rather amazing one, as Andrew just alluded to, because I was surprised to see the patronage had bounced back so quickly in both areas, frankly. But look, from my perspective, the real questions is around how much investment we're going to make in public transport and where. And are we meeting the needs of our communities, and are we working in partnership successfully with our TLA counterparts? They're the sort of measurements that I would find useful. So they are strategic rather than simply operational in terms of maybe percentage growth and patronage or whatever. But you can have those in there too. But KPIs are always challenging to develop. And I'm not sure that they work well as a full committee. So I wouldn't mind working with the chairs to start with. And by all means, you can shoot them down when you get the chance. But the KPIs we report on at the moment probably don't, across the entire organisation, probably don't really reflect the work program particularly well. So this is never an easy area, frankly. But look, we'll give it a go. And my view is keep it at that high level.
I refer us also to the delegations, and we have no general decision making or financial delegations at this committee. But we can appoint working groups and representatives from territorial authorities and other agencies as appropriate, provided they're limited to a time duration consistent with performance of their specified tasks, and receive reporting from those working groups, and we can carry out any other function or duty delegated by councils. I think that's probably enough of a framework for us to be moving on, and it will come to full council for decisions. Okay, so a mover who's just left the room, but he'll be back, and second to Kate. That's Andrew and Kate. Can I put that motion all in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much, team. That's a great start, and we can we've illustrated the different issues faced by our two services as well, which is good. Palmerston, so the next one, 6.2, Palmerston Route Patronage Report. Over to you again, Doug. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We were asked by the old implementation committee to follow up on the success of the changes we've made to the Route 1, Palmerston to the Dunedin route and vice versa. So it's a glowingly positive outcome for the route. The broader services resulted in a significant increase in monthly patronage, to the point that Julie may expand on that. We're actually bursting at the seams on some routes, on some services. So again, very positive, challenging to positive. So it's been a significant success. We have positive revenue and positive patronage changes from these changes.
Yeah, that's great. I'm delighted to see that too. And there's all sorts of kind of things that pop around and induce demand, etc., etc. But I actually think it's a neat situation. Thank you for getting that through. Any questions for the staff? Okay.
Firstly, I don't think we necessarily said that we wanted to report on the success because we weren't sure we were going to have success. We were on the performance. And so the fact that you have, it is a success story. I think you've kept your light very much under the bushel in this report. And it could have been stated even more glowingly because I think it is really exciting. And having heard people in that community, what a difference it's made. It's great. But I do just want to check the figures and how we get those figures. So I think it was somewhere I read, and I'm sorry I haven't highlighted it here, something like 33% of the weekend buses, or so it's 33 people on average. Is it?
Yep.
Yeah. How do you calculate that figure? Can you just some might be 50 and some.
Yeah, so there are very few compared to most other services.
Yeah.
The Palmerston service doesn't run too many services. So I think it's 3 each direction on a Saturday and 2 each direction on a Sunday or something like that, and about 4 in each direction on weekdays. So when we look at whatever the figure is, 33 per bus, we look at the total patronage per weekend on average across those services. So it's, as far as I'm aware, I haven't got the data in front of me, it's reasonably evenly spread between the services that we've introduced at weekends. So it's not the case of having one bus that's incredibly busy and then the other 2 are empty. But part of that is because to give them some credit, full credit to them, it was at the timetable itself, and in fact the request for the weekend service came from the community board. So generally we would tend to put together a timetable for a service, and they asked if they could put one together, which they did. And so what we implemented was actually their timetable. So the service, the reason it's probably popular is the times it operates and are convenient to that community, which is spread across quite a long route. And it is just a reflection of what they actually asked for. So we're effectively running the community's desired timetable.
And it seems to be very good methodology. We should consider that more.
Yes. There's a great lesson.
I think Kevin's got a question. I'm going to ask another one, but I'll let him go through that, Kevin.
It's just on those numbers. That is, yeah, I think we've made a really good response, and there's just even down at the Marae on Waitangi weekend, I was confronted with a lady that said, "Well, what a great service," and a couple of tweaks to it, as they always do, but really just said that that's been a real, for their community has been really positive. But yeah, so your October figure is the patronage was 374 for the month. So I just wonder how you get 33 out of that, because you've got 374, you've got 4 weekends, and you've got 6 trips. So you're 374. October. Sorry, it's number 24 on page. Yeah, 374. You've got 4 weekends, and you've got 6 trips. So I get 15. And you get 33, but I mean, you get 33 average over the whole. But that's a high one, and I'm sort of way below.
That's only one way, isn't it?
Doesn't matter what way you do it.
No, but you're just saying 6, I'm saying 3.
No, there's 4 return trips on a Saturday and 2 return trips on a Sunday.
They say Dunedin Palmerston, does Route 1, sorry, the question I've got for that, is that both ways or is it one way?
Both ways.
Yep.
I don't have the calculations in.
Yeah,
front of
I'll come back
me.
to because I mean.
Yeah,
that-
well,
we'll
maybe
get
we
it,
can just leave that one and
Yeah,
get
it
Julian
is.
to come back to you, Kevin.
But it's just, I mean, that's awesome, and that people are passionate, but look, at the end of the day, we need to have some numbers around actually, like at 33, so we're getting $33 a trip. And the trips are probably on the costing.
$66, government gives us one.
No, what, no, hang on, I've already done that calculation.
Okay.
Delete any funds, please. So we get $33 and it's costing us 162 because Katahi paid the other 176. So, I mean, every trip we get $33 and it's costing us 162. So I'm just, at some stage, we need to, it'd be quite good to know that because those services that we are providing, and so that the additional money, that the extra $130 is going directly into a targeted rate on the rest of the community. So
There is a study underway at the moment. There's a frequency business case, which includes the Palmerston route, and fares and the frequency of those trips is part of that examination. So we'll be looking at the sensitivity of fares as an effect on patronage. So,
awesome. Yep.
So that's underway. You'll be receiving a report on a survey that's just been completed probably at your next meeting, and that'll cover people's response to those questions.
Yeah.
How much they were willing to pay or not willing to pay.
Yeah.
So that's in the pipeline.
And do we also on that track whether people are getting on? Because we're only getting 2 people in Palmerston. We're running from Waikoidi to Palmerston, but everyone's from Waikoidi is getting on. So the
Stage.
it'd be quite interesting to know where
Yeah, we can track that study up.
yeah, but I'm just saying, think more at the time when we have to make a decision whether we're going to increase a fare. I don't want it reported all the time. I'm just saying when we come to make a decision on the viability of that service and whether we should be or cutting and making a decision.
Yeah,
it'd be good to have that sort of stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, Mike.
Good concept's good. Yep.
I
Thank
got similar sums.
I was just going to say, look, the strategic decision ultimately is whether we charge fares at all. In the past, we had 1/3 of our revenue coming from fares, 1/3 from targeted rates and 1/3 from our subsidy from Waka Kotahi. That seemed to be a nice way of cutting up the cake. But right now, we're not doing anywhere near that well on fare recovery. In fact, we're doing way less. It wouldn't even be a sixth, probably, frankly. So ultimately, the issue is around that balance, how we pay for the service. And that is a country decision. We have to bring that to you with some analysis as to the impact it might have.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, thank you.
And to give you some context around that, previously under the go back pre-BCard, I think the pre-$2 fare, if you're paying cash, something like $23, $24 return to Palmerston on the bus versus with the half price fares $1 now. So I happen to think that in general fares aren't necessarily the key thing that draws people onto the service as opposed to quality and timeliness and that sort of thing. But at the same time, when you're traveling 60 kilometers, that does play into it.
Julian, just what come back to you, Kate, as I did some similar figures on that, and my back of the envelopes, it looked like we pay about $1.90 per passenger trip on these numbers, my rate pay. But when I was thinking about this, I was going, well, what's actually our full cost and full benefit here? And what I'd like to ask is, do you consult, say, with Anne Yang or someone to start to understand or our climate team, to understand the full benefits and the full cost accounting in terms of carbon, in terms of social good, all of these sorts of things when we start thinking about those fares? I'd hate to think it was purely a financial model.
So we haven't consulted with the person you mentioned. We do very much, and I think it's a national or global thing in terms of public transport instead of CO2 emissions, which is why we put this sort of pathway to zero emissions with the most recent one being the Unit 3 tender, which ended up with that full electric fleet. But there's a great picture that we have stuck on our wall in the office over there, which we always refer the team to, and it's a picture of a bus on an empty stretch of road, and then a full bus, and then a picture next to it with 70 cars going up and down the road. And you've got emissions, you've got road space congestion. So all those things are factored in. But if you're a commercial business, you wouldn't run 90% of the the Otago network or any public bus service. You just run the peak times, but, there's community, I guess the committee, this new committee will determine exactly how the question are answering, but we certainly consideration of community service and etc., as opposed to just fare box recovery and subsidies.
Thank you. Kate, did you have another question?
Mine was about the gold card, and I'm just understanding, Gazelle is passionate about the Palmerston trip and gold card use. The timing for gold cards on that route are still, a lot of the routes, the times are outside of gold card use.
So the route in the report, which is weekends, weekends are free all weekend. The whole weekend's free for super gold, so there aren't any timing issues.
Okay.
The weekdays, as far as I'm aware, don't have any issues with super gold. We made I'll need to check this, but I believe we made a concession to allow people to board slightly late, around the sort of 3 p.m. time, who are super gold card users, but I think that was put in place some years ago. I need to double check that.
I thank you for your point. I think we've got the sort of KPIs we could be doing on the financials and climate change. I mean, I know that I know your paragraph 32, none directly, however, increased patronage on public transport positively reduces emissions. It would be great to get some measures of every time, Lorraine's a wonderful example. Every time that she comes to the office compared to other staff members by bus, what is her reduction on the carbon footprint? And because that's when if you can get that sort of data, people then start competing and in a positive way. And I think that that's a really healthy measure, that sort of KPIs that we can go on now.
And we don't have to reinvent that wheel.
No,
That
we don't.
research is done around the world.
Yeah.
Okay, can we move on from there? Has anybody else got any other questions about the Palmerston route?
Thank you too. Well,
Okay,
thanks.
moved by Kate.
It's successful.
Thanks. Seconded by Alan. All in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. Move on.
Aye.
Thanks, Gary. Okay, so next is the Unit 5 Public Transport Contract Extension, and this is to seek approval to vary the contract really around the expiry dates and to fit into things. Over to you, Doug.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, as you state, this is a paper asking for the extension of the expiry date of the Unit 5 contract. The reasons are outlined in the paper. One of the driving reasons we did this was, firstly, the operator requested an extension on the basis that we are moving towards a zero emissions focus. And we're also looking at the new SPTF contract process, which is the Sustainable Public Transport Framework. And that has a number of different measures in it that are new, and the operator needs time to prepare for those. There's a number of different factors involved in that. We did start preparing for this about a year ago. Then obviously these changes in the environment occurred over that period of time. And now we would need 12 months essentially to get some breathing space to prepare ourselves and be fair to the operators and in the interest of competition as well. But it is about driving it along to that sustainable framework that we need.
Thank you. Any questions? Seems to me this is all pretty straightforward. Go, Kevin.
Yeah, so under financial considerations, what is the financial impact on our current annual plan? I just sort of come like tweak what that is.
Effectively, nothing, because we pay the existing price that we're paying anyway, but for a longer period of, minimum a year or whatever. The key thing is that at the moment, if we were to tender that contract, because all our other contracts come up for renewal in a few years' time, this one's the earliest. It's the first of the PTOM public transport operating model. I think the first one in the country that went live. If we were to tender, we could tender under the framework contract. We installed that model from back in 2015. The new model that Doug mentioned focuses on pathways to zero emissions, driver conditions and wages and those sort of things. And we and the operator want to extend it so that we can tender under that new model, which have a better outcome rather than be stuck in an old model, which won't give us the council or our passengers a good outcome. We'll be wedded to that for the next 8 years.
Yeah, happy to move all 4 recommendations.
Okay, the second, put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. Assuming there was no discussion.
Madam Chair.
Thanks for that one. Okay, there might be some discussion about this next one. Queenstown Public Transport Business Case Progress. This is to talk about this public transport business case that's kind of been happening in the background for the last wee while. And let's hear about it from you. Thanks, Doug.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you stated, this is to update the committee on the progress we've made with the business case. So the report is as read. Essentially, what we're in the stage we're into now is engagement. We've had a good ILM process, and they've come up with two problem statements that surround two key areas: responsiveness and attractiveness of the service. There are underlying things within that, so we're looking at improved access and improved travel choice particularly. That was the key drivers for it. So we've worked through that with stakeholders, and now we're moving to the engagement phase. So as it states in the report, it's on budget and on time at the moment. We are doing some concurrent work because we had some delays with the modelling originally, so it put us 2 weeks behind. But we are running concurrent work streams. I am confident that we will deliver.
Okay, has anyone got questions around this? Okay.
Sorry, paragraph 9, I think I get it, but I just want to check. When we're saying you're doing a 30-year plan to inform future public transport investment decisions for Queenstown.
What page are you on?
Sorry. 40, 64, paragraph 9. I'm right, report?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah. It's paragraph 9.
It's just my paragraph 9 saying something different. From
Oh,
yours.
sorry.
So I'm not sure if I'm in
Is
the
it-
right place.
You're right.
I am, thank you.
Page 44, paragraph 9 there.
Page 40, right?
Page 40.
And it depends on which report I think you're on.
Okay.
Sorry, which system? Sorry, you're on the same page
Thank
as
you.
me.
Sorry,
I
I'm
think
there.
so. Yeah.
Yes, great. It's always good.
Different bus, but same page.
And I'm having a problem here understanding how we can have a public transport business case being prepared that is almost only public transport and not active transport and not cars. And just as some assurance from, I want to understand what are the other factors that come into developing this, because I feel like this is going down the same route that we're trying literally to unpick now, and to ensure that we've got an integrated business case.
Yeah.
Am I making myself clear?
Oh, you're absolutely making it clear. Our discussions over time, councillor, have been fruitful in this regard. Indicating active travel, the absence of active travel.
Oh, and cars, but yeah, this is an integrated business case. It's not just about public transport, I think is my question.
It focuses on public transport.
But just a second, Doug, it fell out of an original transport business case.
Yes,
Well,
it did. Sorry, the Queenstown business case
Yes.
recommended this public transport business case is undertaken.
Yeah, okay. And the reason for my question is, and you gave a really good example earlier, is that, and I listened to the Beats symposium like at the end of last week. There are a number of people, as you said, who want to bike and then bus. They can either bike and take the bike with them on the bus, or amazingly, they could actually have a really good park at the bus and feel safe about leaving the bike there and get the bus to school or to they don't need to necessarily take the bike. Unless we integrate these things really clearly in the planning, we're not necessarily going to progress it. So I'm just teasing out that this isn't so markedly focused only on public transport that we're actually not going to look at people that do two things.
One of the fundamental things, thank you, councillor, one of the fundamental things about this is choice, improved travel choice. That is one of the nodes that we're looking at. It's not being specifically precluded. It's an embedding of all transport choices, and that will come out as we go.
Okay.
And I think with the engagement stages that we're going to be going over the next 2 months, that will rise to the surface.
Right, thank you.
Sorry.
Any other questions here? Elliot? And then Gretchen.
Isn't around the engagement side of things, but I'm just wondering how the move from the PTOM to the SPTF has changed the scope or possibilities of the Queenstown business case on your end, or has it?
There won't be a direct impact on it. It's not really in that framework. It will change the way operations are. Yeah, certainly. For operating a public service, yeah, it will be slightly different.
Elaborate.
Well, as Pim's talked about the type of contract, there'll be less focus on cost and more on value of the service and the experiential part. It was interesting you're talking about the experiential part of passengers. You know, what experience would make them use public transport better as opposed to focusing on the cost and so on. So that forms part of their transport framework, and a sustainable one. So we're talking about, again, low emissions or no emission services. So that is the difference where PTOM doesn't define that particularly. One of the reasons, if I can just step back to the Unit 5 extension, is that if we'd continued on with a PTOM contract for that, it would have been the only one we would have held in about 3 years, and it would have been an outlier. So aligning that with all our other upcoming contracts is an important step.
And just to be clear, we know what, as Doug said, the things he talks about are things that this new framework is targeting. We haven't seen the full picture yet. So we don't have all the details. As soon as we do, then we'll no doubt speak to you guys about it. But we don't know we haven't got the actual final framework sitting in front of us yet. Yeah.
I'm assuming, like everyone else, Doug, that the business case will literally cover every aspect of transport and the way that the public transport interacts with other modes, and the roading investment, park and ride investment, all the different types of ideas around that. Now, in terms of the cost of it, I know that the business case has been quite a long time. We all get frustrated about length of time. Not pointing the finger at anybody, but could you just remind me that Waka Kotahi is subsidising this business?
Yes, it's standard rates, yeah.
And so they're paying 51% of it, and presumably we're also following their requirements around the way we're putting it together. Equal infinite. So stuff sometimes gets dictated to us because we're only a payer of the service.
It does. I mean, the other part of that, of course, is it's part of our Way to Go partnership. So we have QLDC as well as Waka Kotahi and ourselves driving this along.
Yeah, I suppose the question I was really asking was, when we do procurement, Waka Kotahi tells us the rules on how to do the tender, because such a big contribution comes from them. So, you know, we actually don't have a lot of say over the way we tender for services. We can determine extensions or whatever, but similarly with this business case, we're spending an awful lot of money on it. The ratepayers are only contributing a portion of that. On top of that, there is a process that Waka Kotahi requires of us in developing the business case. I think that's important for all of us around the table to understand. That's a model that's used all over New Zealand.
Yeah, there's a process, and it's consistent across the country to develop a business case for public transport.
Richard's got some questions too, but I think you're still here. Kate, something you
I
say.
just realised, look, our agenda is in order of 6.3, 6.4, 6.5. Our papers have 6.5 before 6.4.
And that's why I'm confused,
you
but
and
I
I
now
can-
know what my questions are that I need to come to in a minute. But
So
thank you for that.
so I wanted some clarity which paper we actually are on.
Well, they're quite conjoined, really.
Yes.
Richard, you had a question.
Yeah, I was just wondering on the paragraph 9 about ORC together with its partner agencies, QLDC and Waka Kotahi, are developing that. Well, we know this, the 30-year this. So yeah, I was wondering what that process entails, and whether, because I've just heard as well, and I understand that Waka Kotahi runs the process as well that we submit the business case to. So how does it work that they're our partners, and are we hearing essentially right now from all three partners, because we're hearing that it's being presented by all three essentially, so, or are we hearing from the ORC, and how has this come about over the last few years? Have we worked together to develop this, or how does that
speak to the last 8 months, but I'll speak to my involvement. Yeah, certainly. It was developed out of the Queenstown business case, and it was scoped between the three partners. So it was scoped in partnership, and that scoping report was presented, I believe, in December 21 to council here and approved. But it's absolutely a partnership in terms of the needs of each partner. Waka Katoa has been the funding agent and the interactions with state highway networks, QLDC for their local networks and community needs, and obviously ORC being the lead for public transport and provision of that. So it is a genuine three-way partnership with Way to Go.
Thank you. Tim, did you have a question?
Yeah, just around that. I mean, I get a little bit confused with the so-called tension between QLDC and the ORC transport, and also the City Council and ORC delivering transport. What are the tensions between the councils that are relevant and important in this consideration of this plan that you're doing?
It's difficult for me to comment directly because the tensions are political from my observation, and that certainly at officer level there are none. Yeah, we work very, very well together, very collegially. I guess certainly what came out, and you would have seen in the quite well reported about ownership of the public transport network, who actually owns and who drives and makes those decisions. And that's one of the points of Way to Go, the three-way partnership, is that we all work in conjunction. I mean, Way to Go as a partnership has two funders and one partner, essentially. Well, three partners, but two of them are funders, and that one is Waka Katoa, and the other funder is Regional Council. QLDC does provide some financial input every year, and that is to offset the $2 fare losses that when we launched $2 fares in Queenstown. Essentially, that's the relationship that we have, but we work together in a strategic sense on, I guess, co-beneficially on co-beneficial projects. So things that we each have some skin on.
So you see it as political tension as opposed to sort of an operational.
I'm not sure I'm able to comment on that.
Who cares?
Yeah, it really, there was a different, I think everyone had a different lens on the problem, and a different conclusion.
Okay, I'd just like to.
So sorry, look, I've just been reflecting on that. I think there have been some shortcomings in the way that we've communicated some of this. I think the work generally at staff level, as Doug has explained, is constructive and positive, and teams work well together, and we see that elsewhere in future development strategies in other areas too. But some of the work that's happened in Way to Go, for instance, never seems to find its way to even ELT, let alone council. So, I think there have been some challenges around the way we've been able to communicate, the way we've worked together, and the roles that people have played in those partnerships, Doug. Because to be perfectly honest, even as chief executive, I haven't had the visibility that I would have liked around how well that's worked. And so then the frustrations happen even at CEO level. So look, we'll investigate the structures of some of those partnerships and make sure that we are getting the strategic input from the council. And because there's no question that there are some frustrations, and it's not just at council level, it's not just the mayor, it's also at the chief executive level. So there's an opportunity for us to improve that partnership, at least to the point where we're communicating better.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm going to mix these two papers up a little bit because they're so integrated in a lot of things.
Well, they are.
A 4 point, whatever, 6 point, whatever it is, and whatever it is. You know what I'll talk about, 6.4 and 6.5.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like there's a real tension that's not well addressed here, and I know it's too late to change it, but that's why I want to mix the papers up. But the tension between the focus and the scope. It's focusing on what the public transport network will look like in the future, and it's talking about bus and ferry, and there's some other scopes there as well. But you've got those scopes, and then in the actual, that's the focus, and then in the scope, you've got things like park and ride, but there's nothing about active transport. And that, I'm just like, well, how can you actually do that? How do those problem statements actually relate to the wider integrated?
Yeah, it was from the original scoping document approved by council. Active travel was excluded from that. So I can't speak to that. And what I can assure you is that it will be taken into account.
I'd really like us
Yeah.
to make sure that it's getting through to this. My next comments were around the engagement, and I think we've got a real problem with that engagement, and that it's not painting that picture of that whole integrated network. And maybe I should come to that in a minute, but there's a couple of things I just want to say, is that if we don't and there's the second problem with it, so we've got that problem, it's not bringing in the whole scope of of a network, an integrated network, including active. And then we've got a problem that we're going to run into with people not being able to separate their current issues from a future focus. Because, I mean, you're going to be asking people about what sort of bus they want. People are just going to tell you, any bus would be really good on a Monday morning, please. Yeah, and so I kind of want us to think about this whole integrated thing, and we'll come to the comms specifically in a minute. But can you please bring this in?
Noted.
As the message. So we've got that, and we've only been asked to note this. Have I got to move on in a second before doing that?
Are you on 6.15 or 6.4?
And we're doing 6.4 to note that update, please. I'm about to move to it. Thank
Sorry,
you.
if we're talking about 6.4, I did have a further question.
You got a question?
Yeah.
Okay, let's have the question first.
Look, I'm just not quite, I'm a bit confused. I think that recommendation, in the executive summary, number 4 on page 43, where it notes the tender process completed, contract award. In that paper, it wasn't quite clear to me what WSP's role is. What's WSP doing? It's, I think, a fairly basic question, but I couldn't work it out.
They are the lead consultant undertaking the business case. Their development. Yeah.
Right, I thought that was quite, I hadn't quite clarified.
Sorry, I'm making.
What does WSP stand for?
Sorry?
So what do the initials stand for?
I don't know, they took over from Works Consultancy at one point. I don't know what WSP stands for.
Okay.
Yeah.
Something fabulous.
I've just known with WSP.
Was there somebody else? A further question?
Yeah, I just, and it's probably a question for Nick, possibly. So we've had a fight. We had a budget of $1.5 million for that process, but it actually came in at 895,000. So where have we accounted for that extra 600K? So you budgeted for the business case when you brought the paper to us, and we agreed to go. The budget was 1.5. Then you put the tenders out that came in at 895,000. Yes. So where can I track that that $600,000 is now out of the budget in?
I can't
services in the Palmerston or something.
I can't speak to that. I know what the budget was set as, and that's what we're working through.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2 questions really.
Yeah.
It sounds like we spent almost 900K. Are we going to need the other 600?
I'm going to say no, we're not. We're tracking very well. It'll come in with the budget set at the end.
And don't forget that what we took is still paying 51% of it. So it's not quite a big.
Yeah, but that's not the question.
No.
Because the report does tell me that it is tracking well. I'm just saying, well, where did the other six that we budgeted in the annual plan for?
Appreciate that, but half that's been paid for by what?
Yeah, I'm not actually worried about that quantum at all. Well, okay, but we still budgeted 1.5 million. So I'm just saying where's that accounted for? That's all.
Is he engaged?
Question for that. That's all. If I could have that tracked.
We give that information to Kevin.
It all just flows through the transport reserve. So it just flows through. So it means then the spend will come down. Obviously, the revenue that will from what Kotahi drops of the net amount will just flow through. And in theory, the net amount, which would be 300,000, the transport reserve should be better off than what's factored into the budget. But as we've sort of shown before with other things, there's a whole lot of stuff flowing in and out of those reserves, and then we'll look at where we end up at the end of the year. Typically with what we've had around reduction in fares and increased costs, the reserves, even with that factored in, still end up worse than what we've budgeted overall.
Is that enough of an answer for you there?
No, I'll take that with
You'll
Nick.
take that with Nick?
It doesn't really, because it doesn't actually highlight where the actual costs within that budget are then coming from. Because we've had a bonus, all of a sudden we've had a bonus, but we're not really, so that's all right, as long as I can track, no trouble.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions on this, Andrew?
Yeah, apologies for sneaking away, and apologies if this question's already been asked, but does the scope of the overall business case in any way, shape or form change in light of what we've been through over the last, since post-COVID, I suppose, is my question. My apologies if you've covered this.
No, we haven't.
We have covered scope, yeah.
Oh, we've covered the scope, but it can't really be changed, can it? Because we've already endorsed it.
Yeah, it's quite late in the piece, yeah. It's the scoping, the original scope was endorsed.
So it doesn't change in my view, is that right?
Sorry, Doug, just to clarify, we're looking at it 30 years out.
Yeah.
So we're looking at the type of public transport service supporting the other forms of active and various complementary services around investment in roads and the like. We're trying to establish that we're going to have a fit for purpose public transport service 30 years out. And so COVID ought not make any difference to that at all.
Can I just follow up with another question?
Yeah.
So you're confident that Queenstown Lakes District Council and other stakeholders are fully comfortable with the scope that we've already endorsed. So you're confident at this stage of the process, we've got everybody on board best we can to this point.
I can, engagement. Yeah, Council, with respect to that, I hold regular meetings with those two partners at this level. They're fully informed and fully aware. So any advisory reports we get, any stage currency reports we get, anything like that is discussed in full with them as our partners. So, and they have the opportunity to comment and give feedback as part of this process. So they're fully engaged with it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so have I got somebody willing to put and we've got to move it for all five?
Jocelyn and Councillor Perry, yes.
Right, thank you. Put the motion. All in favour, Sarah? Okay.
We're going to the right now.
We're so confused, sorry.
It was a little bit confusing the way those papers were titled, but never mind.
Chair, just for clarity, we just dealt with 6.4.
Yeah,
6.4 only, but actually in the papers, it talks about that being part of the engagement. So I kind of leapt into that as well as all part of it to clarify something else. But anyway, we're now back on track, I think, and apologies for dragging us in a funny direction. 6.5 are the engagement plan. And again, we're in your hands, Doug, as you seek approval for the engagement plan.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I got lost there as well. I just have to turn my page.
Page 45. Oh no, that's where the 43 is, right? That's right.
There we go. Okay. What you've got.
I have a different version.
No, everyone.
Everyone does. It's a different version. Okay. Marvelous. Oh, I see. Things got to get confused.
Yeah.
6.5 comes.
I tried to get them to put them in one page, but
That's okay. 6.5. Now we are on the engagement plan on page 39. My document
45 on, so 43 on something.
in your
Thank
hands.
you very much. In front of you is a report seeking approval for the content of the engagement process that we're going to be holding for the Queenstown Public Transport business case. Stage one has been completed, so we're happy with that, and we're now going to be consulting on a list of options from the long list. They include options for public transport in Queenstown, frequency, the reach of the service, the timing, and the capacity, as well as very important considerations for the ferry and the options for growth there, and design options right down to the type of bus that we want to see. The methodology will be online, particularly. We've had some success with online surveys, meetings with our key stakeholders, including the airport and other providers, pop-up sessions to talk to the public, and as usual, a rather large survey. So we're going to engage through those mechanisms. And you'll see the content is appended to that report. And the timing will be over the next 6 to 8 weeks, and there'll be a follow-up report following that.
Okay, Kate?
I have a pedantry problem with the word park because generally in people's minds are cars. And can I have some assurance in relation to park and ride that it may be the wider term, that it may be bike parking, which is safe and secure and sheltered, and car parking, or am I going to be disappointed?
No, it's all contextual, I think. Yeah,
So
I take your point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, and well designed, and that is a comment for others who know this building and its new bike parks. So, yeah.
I take your point that parking generally mean park your car, but we're talking about a wider modal description here, I think.
And part of my questions earlier, so
Exactly.
yeah, I do want to make that clear, and I haven't seen, sorry, I possibly should have been able to go back and see the whole report, but I haven't, and what that means, because I wouldn't be happy if this wasn't engaging at that level. This is about kids who can't drive a car, being able to access the public transport system, and be free and independent of their parents to travel.
I don't think there's anything excluding a bike park.
That is well designed into that area.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions here?
On that basis, I'm to move in.
Thanks. Andrew?
It's a finance question. I think it's probably for Nick. But under financial considerations, it talks about the business case of tracking within expected limits. Within our 10-year plan, there's no assumptions made of the outcome of this business case in terms of level of service, funding requirements in that regard.
Well, not specifically, because you don't know what might come out of it. But there in the LTP, if you go through and if you look at those, those tables that I've given you previously, you'll see both for Dunedin and Queenstown, you have bus contracts, but there'll be service improvements and there'll be placeholders in future years for assumptions around different things, different amounts that might be needed, but those haven't been determined because exactly what they might be and whether those are the right amounts will come out of the business case. But we do put provision in there with placeholders and very high level estimates. But in most cases, they were beyond this 3 years of this LTP because the plan was to do the business case in these 3 years. And then when we go into setting the next LTP, we should have more information to then reassess what we had and firm up some of those numbers and the various timing of when things may or may not happen. But as Tim also said, the business case will be looking out even beyond a 10-year LTP period as well.
So thank you.
Thank you. I've just got one of my own. The Remarkables Park Bridge. Remarkables Park Bridge, is that the one that crosses the Kawerau and round about Boyd Road area, and that they're now saying is going to cost a lot more than they thought?
Yes.
It is. Bother. Okay, so the other thing is that I'm looking at where it says I'm on page 51 of my document. Let's take a look at future public transport options.
Yes.
And I'm seeing that there is thinking about walk out and catch frequency. So you've got a walking catchment. Plans that I've looked at other parts of the world also have a biking catchment, and I know there's not one there. And especially if we're thinking park and ride, maybe we should also be considering biking catchment.
We could use the term bike and ride.
But
I think walk, bike and ride. I think it's a combination of all those modes.
Yeah, but it's just there is a specific walking catchment in here.
That is, we can be more explicit about those terms, so I think.
Yeah, and I really do urge again a separation of current problems in the consultation document, which this isn't actually the consultation document here, I don't think.
Yeah, it's the themes that we're using.
The things that are informing it. And I think there really has to be that separation, or we're just going to get not constructive engagement. We might get engagement, but not that's thinking about 30 years out. We have to get people to park their issues with the current transport problems and look to future. On that basis, anybody else? Elliot, yeah.
I'm just wondering how we're actually going about engaging. Like, I know it's just, you know, online material and face-to-face meetings, but are there specific plans to try and get, you know, parts of the community that are certainly stakeholders in public transport, but aren't as likely to show up, you know, young people, as Kate pointed out to me, but lower income people as well, some of them more likely to use the buses, but also less likely to show up. That kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point. The transport disadvantage, whether it's young people without licenses or older folk that need that assistance with transport, a very key part of who we need to talk to.
Yeah, sorry, I thought it was such a good question out there because we've got a project happening that Amanda's leading at the moment around engagement and the difference between consultation and engagement. And I think we want to take note of that. I mean, it's one, engaging with the people who are currently using public transport and also engaging people who are choosing not to. And then the concept which Julian raised earlier around Palmerston, which I rather liked, where the community actually got to choose their own times and their own routes. That seems like engagement to me, of the sort of engagement that I'd like to be doing with the community, where they're actually telling us, you know, what the services are that make sense to them rather than us planning it somewhere in a back room. I think, Julian, you explained to me that's how we did do Queenstown, and you weren't overly impressed when I met with you last week, and I think you said you pulled it together yourself in about 10 minutes. And secondly, that the services are all has been entirely Dunedin-centric for some time, which I'm also going to share because it's quite directly from you. You've been here 9 years, and my view is that the service around public transport, public transport, should be entirely Queenstown Lakes District centric into the future, because that's where the real needs are going to be around population growth and challenges which far outweigh anything that we have here in Dunedin. So I just wanted to share some of that with this committee on the basis of some of the comments that I got from the guy who's been around longer than anyone else, Julian.
Yeah, I mean, in brief, if you look at the decisions that have been brought to council and the spend that council has put into public transport in terms of changing what we've already got over the last 9 years, you know, 95% of the effort's probably been on Dunedin. That includes things we talked about, you know, school services, additional trips, new routes, all that sort of stuff. With Queenstown, it's been more working with what we have, and we make some changes, minor changes, but improve one area to the expense of somewhere else. There's not really been any concentrated effort or investment to, in my opinion, in that area, or not to the level that we need to. So it's good that there's a lot of focus on Queenstown right now, because it does need a lot of attention, I think.
How are we able to support that attention?
I think just acknowledging it firstly is a really good start.
KPIs.
KPIs?
And secondly, if we're doing what Doug's telling us we're doing really well, which is working closely with the staff of those partner organisations to the point that everyone's getting input. And then finally, that we are engaging the way that we believe engagement should be done, which is not always about us telling people what we think and getting their feedback, but actually asking them what they think and ultimately allowing them some of the freedom around decision making and the responsibility around decision making, which in my view, it gets us much closer to true engagement.
Yeah. I think one of the key points there is you look at Dunedin is not going to grow at the same rate, obviously. I mean, Queenstown's insane. But Queenstown's growth is based around an infrastructure that's growing. So we're talking about new roads, new people, new houses, which develops new trips. And we want those trips to be public transport trips. And the majority of the capacity of people we've got up there. So it is a vital part of the business.
Well,
and it will remain so for a very long time.
We don't just want them to be public transport trips. We're going to end up with an extremely expensive, extremely polluting car park from all the way down State Highway 6 and 6A if we don't manage this. And I sometimes think that is something that we aren't quite getting through our heads and into our responses, and it really needs to happen. Okay, we've got Kate, we've got what's Michael? Kevin. I was about to call you Michael, sorry.
Sorry, I'm going to sound critical, and I'll take you on first, because in your statement, which was a really good introduction today, you missed out what I think is one of the greatest opportunities, and that's the expansion of PT into the regions. And
there was a reason for that, but you know,
yeah, and your comment just now, Doug, about the growth of Queenstown is exactly the same, the pressure that's being felt in Cromwell now, and we could nip some of that pain in the bud if we did that. So I'm saying that because while we're dealing with this issue, part of that may be an extended regional. What is the scope for an extended regional PT service that would reduce the cars coming in from Cromwell, that would say some of that exacerbated? A lot of labour force coming from Cromwell. Is there any scope in this to do that?
It's probably too late in
Yeah.
terms of this, but it is a work stream that Lorraine and I have been talking about, certainly Wanaka.
Yeah, and what?
Cromwell has been bubbling under the surface there. We don't have any data or any demand-driven data at the moment to act on it. I think it's like you say, where people are commuting to and from is a direct function of how much it costs to live in Queenstown.
Yeah.
You know, and that's going to get increasingly more difficult.
So I suppose, I hope that as we go out for this engagement, we're really open for those other discussions that may be beyond the scope that will no doubt come out of the consultation. I think anyone who wants to speak, go on that road at 6 o'clock in the morning will see that there's an issue there and a potential opportunity.
Yeah, if the engagement raises things like that, council, I think that's something we are obligated to follow through.
Thank you.
Writing a KPI when you haven't set your strategic direction on transport would be foolhardy, in my opinion. So what we actually need to do in this paper now, we're getting into something that we actually need to do as a council, is strategic direction. So I'd rather move recommendations 1 to 5. I'm happy to move so, but we'd rather have a strategic conversation that we should be having about where we put our priorities in public transport.
I think we already have that though. We have a regional.
Well, I don't want to actually discuss it now and here because it's actually quite irrelevant to the paper. So I just, yeah.
Sorry, not understanding you.
Done 6.4,
Yeah.
and now on 6.5, which
Yeah,
is
not-
backwards.
The papers were
What
inadvertently
are the
swapped.
paper? What are the one you want to move now?
Engagement plan.
Yep, I'm happy to move that.
I'm happy to second that.
Thank you. Any further discussion? No further discussion. Do you want to speak to it at all, Kevin? Is it
No, very
Okay.
comfortable with what's set out. Yeah.
put that and all in favour?
Aye. We've got new issues that have been for our agendas.
I think that we've come to the end of that, which was brilliant. Thank you very much. I will close this meeting with a karakia before we all move. Kia tauta rangimaria, ki runga I ngā iwi. And thank you very much, transport team. I know the pressure's coming on you and wonderful to have you on board, Lorraine, and thank you.